Can I get one?
For what God will do when you are going through. He'll show his faithfulness. I'm a witness. He has delivered me from where I used to be. I am truly.
Can I get a witness?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. Come on in. Yeah, we got it. Can you see me? Or do I need the light? No, I need the light, honey. I'm too chocolatey for that. Hey,
Yes.
Whitney. Hey, Rita. Oh.
Hey, Ben. Erica. Yay. Hey, guys.
Yeah, got it.
Yes.
I'm so excited. So excited.
Yes.
I'm gonna wait for a couple of people to come in before we get started.
Do you want to
I
just
see
let
you
people
down
know
here.
what we're actually doing?
Yes, I've been posting all week, but tonight's discussion is going to be on fatherlessness, which is something that God assigned me to a while ago, and I've been rebellious. So I'm finally acting on what I need to do, and you're going to be the first person that I'm interviewing. So before we start anything, got to start with a prayer.
All right.
Okay. Father God, in the name of Jesus, I just thank you on today. I thank you, God, for just dropping in this assignment, oh God, this kingdom assignment. I thank you for allowing me to, trusting me enough to be a vessel, oh God, to be able to be a conduit to other people, to allow them to not just be interviewed, but to share their testimony. I pray that people are delivered, set free, and healed, oh God. God, I just thank you, and I ask that you just send the comforter of the Holy Spirit during this time, during this conversation, and that other people's lives will be impacted by this. I thank you for everything. In Jesus Christ's name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. So, Vanessa, you are my first person that I am speaking with, and I have known you for, what, almost 10 years?
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
And not only just as just someone, but you're my sister-in-law. So
Yes.
we listen, we've been through a lot together. Okay? This
Yes,
is
we
Jesus
have.
right here. Thank God,
The
okay?
good, the bad, and the ugly.
The ugly, honey. Okay, but we're here now. But during that time, I just want to highlight that I know that you had openly shared, especially when I lost my father about 6 years ago, that your father passed away. And so we never really got into like a deep discussion about the process, the grieving process with you and your father. It was more so, what was going on with me and my family. So I think that you are the perfect first person to interview, so I can learn more about you and learn more about what took place and how you came from then to where you are now. So my first question is going to be, just tell me about your father. Tell me about your childhood. Just walk me up into to that point.
Well, okay. I'll start when I was born. My father was 66 when I was born. So with that being said, he was definitely an older parent. I remember when I was young, I've never known my father to have anything else other than white hair. I mean, he was 66 when I was born. So imagine when I was growing up, he was already in his 70s almost. Right. So, he had white hair. So, people used to always think he was my grandfather when we would be out in public. They would say, oh, your grandfather. People that didn't know us, would say, oh, your grandfather. And I used to get so upset because I'm like, he's not my grandfather. He's my father. Yeah. But, so with that being said, my father was an older man, obviously at 66, it's hard having a child at that age. That's really unheard of. So because of that, I think played also a major role in the way that he parented, because at that age, you can't do as much as you could when you were younger. Me and my sister are 13 years apart. So she was already obviously 13 when I was born. So the father that she knew and the father that I knew were two different people because of that reason, because of the age difference with between her and I, as well as how old my father was when I was born. I was actually a mistake, so that's probably why he was that old.
Nobody's gonna take girls.
Well, they did. I was an oops. They had no idea that
Okay.
I was not.
You were a blessed surprise.
Yes, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So with that being said, my father was already older. He was home all the time because he was already retired. He was in the service, and he was a chef in the service. So he cooked. He did all that stuff. My father cooked every single day, every meal. I grew up with a man being in the kitchen, and he, there wasn't much that he can do in the sense of, physically because he was older. But one thing that he always tried to do was he did talk. He talked a lot to us because he wanted to set certain morals in his daughters, which is me and my sister. So that I can say that my father definitely left a stamp on in my life. My father was an alcoholic. He drank heavily. And when he did drink, he became very violent. So there was a lot of abuse in my household. I grew up seeing a lot of things that I shouldn't have. My mother, went through a lot with him. And when you're young at that age, because my mother was younger and my father was older, I was a little closer to my mother because she was younger. She was able to do more with us. She was, more able to be more active. So I would say for me, I can't speak for my sister, but I know for me, I was a little closer to my mother in that sense. So being a child and seeing that kind of abuse, watching my mother be abused, it definitely grew some resentment. The reason why I moved to upstate, me and my mother, is because my father literally tried to murder my mom. And she ended up in the hospital. I was 13 at the time. I was in the middle of 7th grade in Brooklyn. And I got a call saying not to go home. It was literally a murder scene. So, things had transpired, and I literally was snatched from everything that I knew to move upstate. I had to leave everything, friends, clothes. I literally was told to leave school, not go home. My mother was obviously in a hospital fighting for her life. Within the next couple of days, I was upstate. Wow. So just, so that's traumatizing in itself. But then knowing that my father tried to take my mother's life, literally, was very difficult to deal with, because that's still your father.
Right.
My mother was always the type of woman to never, ever, 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 ever bad talk my father. Even when me and my sister would be angry because, we would see the things that he would do, she always made sure that we loved him regardless, because still in all, he never abused us. And I don't mean to, I'm making excuses for him, but he never abused me and my sister.
Right.
So it was like, he still loves you, regardless of what, because it wasn't like he was abusing us. He's never ever, I've had to do my father was crazy. So, I would literally have to do something bad in order for him to get to that point with me. But as far as the abuse, it was never with us. So to a degree, she tried to justify his actions by letting us know that the issue wasn't with us. It was with her. But still in all, that's our mother. So,
but I'm thinking that you might have you were kind of torn because he was abusing her, but not you guys. So it's like conflict.
Right. But either way, he still tried to take my mother's life. So I took it personally.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Because I'm like, you're trying to kill my mother. This is my mother. You know, I don't care what the problem is. That's my mother. I want her here. We need her. So I was angry for a while. And then, just coming up here, leaving everything everything I've ever known behind so quickly, so abruptly. It was just a traumatizing thing altogether. So I move up here. Still in all, it took a while for things to kind of die down at that point. But, still in all, there was still a certain bond that we had with our father, regardless of the abuse, regardless of everything else that was going on. And how I knew that was I became pregnant at 17. My father was one of those, he was one of those prideful Puerto Rican men that you didn't want to mess with. He loved everyone. He would take care of anyone. He would feed anyone. He would do anything for you. He would to give you the shirt off his back, but you didn't want to mess with him. He had a bad temper, and he was very protective. So, and still in all, like I said, I was still angry about the situation that occurred, but still in all, my mother, even him still trying to take her life, she would still tell me, that's your father. You need to love him. You need to talk to him. You need to forgive him. I forgive him. You need to forgive him.
Wow.
I was 17 and I became pregnant. And I was living up here. Obviously, my father was still in Brooklyn. And he was still older. Prior to that, he got diagnosed with prostate cancer.
Wow.
And this is only a couple of months. And he wasn't, he had just started going through chemo. And, at his age, he was already in his 70s. At that age, I mean, it was just a lot. And he did so much drinking over the years. His body was just kind of giving out. But I was pregnant and I was like, I have to go see my father, obviously, because he's sick. But now I have to explain to him that I'm also pregnant and I'm 17. And I knew that my father was not going to be with that, no matter what condition he was in. So I was still terrified of this man because regardless of what, he still instilled certain values in me, in his daughters, that I knew what I was doing went against all of that, everything of what he taught me. So at that point, I realized, you know what, the bond that we have is still there. And I need to forgive him because he's still my father and I don't know how much time he's going to have left. And at that point, I was pregnant. I was young. I still wanted my father. I went down to see him and, I had to, explain to him, well, once he saw me, I was already 6 months pregnant.
Okay.
So he as soon as he looked at me, he said, in Spanish, he points to my stomach. He said, Vanessa, what's that? I said, the room kind of got silent. My sister was like, yeah, well, I'm not helping you out with this one. You're on your own. So, I mean, she was there with me, but it was a scary feeling. I mean, even though I know, he's not going to physically do anything to me, but just that disappointment, I didn't want to disappoint him. I didn't want to, stress him out. I just, I was afraid of how that conversation was going to be. But, at that point, he was just like, I love you anyway, and I think he knew that he was, sick. Obviously, we all knew, but I think at that point, he's just like, listen, I don't have much time, that was in, I want to say that was in June I saw him.
So what year was
born? This was 2003.
Okay.
My daughter was born September 2nd of 2003. I saw him, his birthday was on November. We had a party for him. That was the last birthday we celebrated with him, and that was also the first and last time he ever saw my daughter.
So she was 2. She was 2
No,
months.
she was 2 months. Yeah, she
Okay.
was 2 months. My was a month, and she was 2 months old, and that's the first and last time that he ever saw her. Um, I got the call. I was working at Dunkin' Donuts at the time up here, upstate, and I was at work, and I got the call that he had passed. My sister was down there with him. She's the one that basically took care of him because she was there. Um, and that was, it was mixed emotions, honestly, because since I had moved up here, I was already up here 5, 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, between those 5 and 6 years, we really didn't have that much communication. Um,
Is
I
that
would
because of what
speak to him.
happened? I'm sorry. Is that because of what happened with your mom? So you still had a little
Yeah,
resentment? Yeah.
yes and no. And I can't say that it was all just me. I think it was a combination of things. But yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
think that me moving up here just changed my entire family dynamic. Um, it just it just changed everything. So, and I think I don't know, I can't speak for him. I don't know if it was difficult for him to even face me after that. I don't know. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what he was feeling, but I know um my father had a lot of pride too, so he probably felt like, listen, I'm not, he was a man that stood his ground. So, if he felt like he was right, and nobody can change his mind. So I in between that time we didn't have much communication. So when my father passed, um, there was a multitude of things that played a part. I never got to see my father fully buried. We never had a funeral here for him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he ended up going to Puerto Rico, and me and my sister didn't have enough money to fly out at that time. I mean, we had both just had babies,
Mm-hmm.
and I was only 17. I mean, I was working at Dunkin' Donuts already on my own. So I really, I personally didn't have the money to fly out there. And my sister didn't. We had newborn babies.
Mm-hmm.
It was just tough. So that in itself was hard, to lose your father um, under those circumstances and not even be able to pay your last respects. You don't really get closure.
Mm-hmm.
I know I didn't, and I'm sure. Well, my sister kind of did because she went to the funeral home and she saw him right before he left.
Oh.
I did not.
Mm.
I did not. So, I live with that, and that's a difficult thing. With everything going on in Puerto Rico, my father's actually laid to rest there. So, and I can't even get there. I don't know, the condition of where he is. It's just, it's a sad thing. And then, because we didn't have the communication, as much, you know, it was a lot of things that I wish I could have said. I wish we could have spoken about. Um, my father was older at that time, so I have certain things that I have to live with that were never resolved. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but now, I'm 31 years old. I've lived almost half my life without my father. Um, it's a difficult thing because my daughters will never know their grandfather ever. Um, they will never know the man that I grew to know, that I grew to love. I know he would have adored his granddaughter, and
Mm-hmm.
or grandchildren because I have a nephew. Um, it's just unfortunate, they will never. My father, you know, was born and raised in Puerto Rico. He's the reason why I'm in tune with my Puerto Rican roots.
Mm-hmm.
He was a very intelligent, funny. Um, he had his flaws, like I said, with the alcohol and the abuse. But you know, regardless of what, I appreciate my mom for making sure even though we saw his flaws, we also appreciated the positive.
Right.
You know, because regardless of what, he was still my father, you know, and I never knew, I never knew any other dynamic but my mother and my father, you know, because my mother made sure no matter what, you need to recognize that he's still here and he loves you.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, in retrospect, that has helped me in being a mother, with my children,
Mm-hmm.
because, you know, relationships happen, things happen. I'm not with my oldest daughter's father. So it helped me deal with my children and their relationships with their father.
Mm-hmm.
But it's difficult. And, you know, that's why when your father passed, I felt I could relate completely in every aspect,
Mm-hmm.
because I knew how it feels to lose your father, regardless of what the circumstances are. You know, it's hard, you know, especially being a woman, you know, we want to get married. Who's going to walk us down the aisle? You know, when you have relationship issues, and, you know, you want to have a man's perspective. You don't have anybody to talk to. You don't have anybody that's going to give it to you real and love you unconditionally and not judge you and be honest. You know, it's tough. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's tough. And then, you know, your children have to grow up never knowing their grandfather. You know, it's a void that is there that will never subside, as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm.
You know, no matter how many years go by. You
Right.
know, I was 17. Like I said, I was 17. I'm 31 now. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a void that will never ever be able to be filled.
Right.
You know. But yeah,
Well,
that's pretty
go
much
ahead.
my history in a nutshell.
Mhm. Well, I wanted to add to some of that. I thank you for sharing that, because that's a lot that I didn't know, even though I've known you for almost 10 years. So that was
Yeah.
enlightening. One thing that I know is that about you is that you love to help people. You're like, you love to serve people, especially the elderly. That's
Mhm.
as far as I'm concerned, that's your ministry. And
Yes, it is.
and
It
you
is.
really love to do it. And, you know, share with everyone why. What's the tie-in with your
Um,
dad?
well, the reason, okay, I was 17, like I said, when I lost my father. Well, first of all, now that I think about it, my father, both my mother and my father, I mean, they would take anybody in. They didn't care who it was. They didn't care. One thing that my father always said, we didn't grow up with much. You know, we
Mm-hmm.
weren't rich. We didn't have, we grew up on welfare. We did not have by any means a lot of money. But one thing my father always said, I may not be able to have a lot of money, but I have a plate of food and I have a place for you to stay. I can at least offer you that. And
Mm-hmm.
I will never turn anybody down. Watching him and my mother be that way, because even as a kid, we're like, why are all these people here? Why do you always have to have people here? Why do you always got to help everybody? Like, why can't we just have what we have and keep it for us? Like, me and my sister, like, what is going on? But now that I'm older, I appreciate that and I admire that. And I think for me, and even my sister, but she's a lot different than I am. But in that sense, she will help anybody also. But I don't know. For me, it just I'm sure that instilled that has helped me. But when my father passed away, I was 17, and I felt he was in the hospital. He had to stay in the hospital in hospice. This is before I knew anything about any of this healthcare stuff. He had to stay in hospice, and I just felt so helpless. I was here. I couldn't go down there as much. You know, like I said, I had just had my baby. I had a newborn baby. And it was just, it was very difficult feeling like there was nothing I can do to help. And I always said, if there's a way that I can help other people, that's what I want to do. I was working at Dunkin' Donuts at the time. I was already on my own. And one of my customers came in and they said, you know, you make a great caregiver. And it clicked to me. And I said, you know what? I had no idea anything about healthcare. I had no idea what it entailed, but they kind of gave me a little bit of information. They're like, listen, you know, you can go here. They provide the classes. You know, you go there and you can become an aide and, you know, get certified and everything. And because I guess I had felt so helpless with not being able to help my father, I always said, I don't want my mother or anyone in my family for that matter I don't want to ever feel that way again about anyone in my family, that I feel helpless and I can't help them, because I want to make sure that they're being taken care of properly. We had some issues with the hospital and the aides. There were some that were fantastic. There were some that weren't. And I mean, honestly, I know that there's no way to avoid that, but at least I know, because I'm in that field now, I know the ins and outs. I know what the do's and don'ts, the who's. And I just said, you know what? I guess I use that as a void for my father, for what I couldn't help him with. I said, I'm going to help other people with. And I got certified when I was 18, and I've been doing this ever since, and I'm 31 now. And I feel, I guess it fills that void it helps with that guilt in a sense that I wasn't able to help him, but I know I'm doing others a justice, you know, because I know what those families are going through. I know what it's like because I was there. I was them at one point, and I'm there now with my mom. So, you know, I'm on that other side also. I've been on that other side. I've been the family member, and I'm also the caregiver. So when you are able to relate better, it helps, you know. So yeah, that's more or less why I became an aide, to help, you know, to help those that need the help, and I felt like I couldn't be there for him, so the least I can do is be there for others, you know.
And you love it. You're passionate.
I
You're very
do.
passionate about it, and people pick that up. Like, they know when you really care about them
I
and when
try.
you're just there. And
I
you
try.
know, I know that you really love doing what you do.
It's not easy, but you know, and then, you know, I never had grandparents either.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, my father was obviously 66 when I was born, so his parents were long gone. My mother's mother died when she was born, and her father died fairly young also. I believe he was in his 40s or 50s. So I never was raised with grandparents. And, you know, I treat the elderly like they're my grandparents. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I don't care what color they are, race, whatever. None of that matters. All I know is they're fun. You get attached to them, you know? So it's like, and they treat me, you know, they're like, oh, you know, I love you like my family. And, you
Mm-hmm.
know, I've gotten really close with a lot of the family members and a lot of the residents that I've taken care of. And, you know, it's like I look at them just like, you know, they're the grandparents I've never had,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And that helps also, you know, because they're people too, regardless of what.
That's
They
right.
just need help.
That's
They
right.
just need help. And I've
So,
taken care of all ages also, by the way. You know,
all
I help
ages.
anyone.
You said
All
all ages.
ages, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Ages, yeah.
So, do you think that's helped, like, with you being able to heal? Do you feel like you're healed from Because they say like there's a grieving process, and some people, they might say, all right,
Well,
I'm done grieving.
I will say yes, yes. At this point in my life, yes, I am healed. It took years to get there. And honestly, what really helped me was seeking therapy.
Mhm.
At that point is when I will say that I actually dealt with every aspect of my childhood,
Mhm.
including my father, losing him, the impact that it had on me. It wasn't until I saw therapy that I actually dealt with it. So, and that's been, um, I want to say maybe like 8 years ago.
Wow.
So, and I'm 31 now. So, I mean, from 17 until that time, um, I really didn't. I just suppressed it.
Mhm.
I had a new baby. Life just goes on and you just go with it. So you kind of just suppress the pain and whatever the grief. You just suppress it. At least I know I did. And then I didn't realize the damage that it was actually causing within
Mhm.
myself. Um, so I went and saw a therapist and actually realized how much it was affecting my life. And it was important not only for myself but for everyone around me
Mhm.
that I had to deal with, or I had to deal with me for that matter. So,
Yeah.
um, grieving, I did a lot of crying. I did a lot of self-healing. Um, and it's hard. Like, even the holidays are coming up. you know, Holidays were a big thing in my family. My house was the go-to house.
Mhm.
Everybody came to my house. My father loved to cook, so he was the chef, so he cooked a huge feast. Music, food, alcohol. It was the party house. So,
Mhm.
you know, once we moved up here and my mother and my father split and then he passed away, it just the holidays are tough for me,
Mhm.
especially because, well, me and my sister, and for us, it's hard because they're not the same. They're not the same. They never will be the same.
Mhm.
Um, Me and my sister get together, and we try to remember the fun times and the traditions that my father set. Taught us, and try to follow those traditions and just keep our our family traditions and our family memories,
Right.
alive.
So important.
But it's yeah, the holidays are especially tough,
Yeah.
because we just had so much fun.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, death is something that's never easy. Um, it's never something you can prepare for. Doing what I do, we deal a lot with death also. It's just one of those things, you know.
Especially of a parent. It's just nothing like it to me.
You
Anyway,
only get one set. You only
that's
get one mother and one father. And that's what my mother always stressed to me. You only get one mother, you only get one father. You know, when they're gone, they're gone. That's it. There's no bringing them back. There's no replacing them. It's just, they're gone.
right.
And you have to learn how to move on with that void, because that void will never go away.
Mhm.
Um, so it's hard. The only thing I try to do is just try to, remember the good, and try to live my life, and remember those morals and those lessons, those that advice and everything that he taught us, in spite of all the negative, you know, because nobody's perfect, regardless of what he was, who he was. He did things that he shouldn't have. But you know what? Through all of that, I still wish he was here.
Understood.
You know.
So overall, because we have people who are watching now and who will watch it on a replay, and they have lost a parent,
Yes.
what would you say is the number one thing that really helped you during this time? Or would you say, you know, I really encourage you to do this in order to get to a place of peace? Even though it might be different for everybody else, but would you say definitely you should go to therapy, or definitely?
Well, knowing what I know now that I didn't know then, working in the healthcare field, I've, you know, learned we deal with death. And that also helped me also, because I gained a lot of knowledge and a lot of education on the grieving process, because it's part of my job to help people grieve. That also helped tremendously with my healing process. So I will say what's out there now that I didn't know was then when it first happened for me. There's a lot of help out there that there's a lot of counselors, there's grieving counselors out there. There's groups that you can go to. Some people that may be too invasive for them, they might not want to be in a public setting. There's, you know, private therapy that you can seek, because we don't have the answers. We're too busy grieving. We're too busy trying to understand our loss. We don't have that answer because we're just too stuck in our emotions, which is a natural reaction. That's why I say also time alone, because you need, with life, with all that, you know, if you have kids, you have a family, those things can sometimes be a distraction, and it's not meant to be a distraction. It's our life. That's the life we live. You know, you got to work, you got to take care of your family and your home and everything else. But that can also be a distraction and part of your grieving, because you're not able to really sit and think and clear your mind. And it is important that you spend time with yourself and your thoughts, because that is the only way that you're going to get to really understand and accept those emotions. You can't do that if you're constantly, and that some people, that's what they want. They want to continue to be busy. They want it because they don't want to deal with those emotions. But only by doing that, you're just suppressing. That doesn't mean they're going to go away, because they're not. They're going to always be there. And that's just prolonging that process, that grieving process. Because that may not, you know, it might be 3 years down the line and bam, it just hits you.
Yep.
Even though it was 3 years ago, but because you finally are dealing with those thoughts in your mind, in your head, because your life has changed, and now you're able to actually, it's just came in your head and you're actually paying attention to it. Now it's hit you. And you know, everybody's different in that way. But I would say the longer you wait, the harder it is, because then you think to yourself, all these years went by. Now you have to think about from the time that happened, that they actually passed away, to the time that this is actually hitting you. And you're like, wow, all this time went by, you know, you weren't dealing. So now you have to think about all that past time. And it's there's no right answer, because there's no way to tell people, you know, you need to grieve within this certain amount of time, or, you know, it takes this amount of time, because
Right.
it's always going to be
Everybody's
difficult.
different. Mm-hmm.
And it's always going to be difficult. Like I said, I'm 31. My father passed away when I was 17. Even still, every holiday, every year, it's difficult for me. So, and little things will come up and remind you of them. And, it's never going to leave you, but it's not consuming you either.
Right. That's a good
That
way of
grief is
putting it.
not consuming you.
Mm-hmm.
So, it is important to make sure that you try to heal. As hard as it is, as difficult as it is, nobody wants to. It's not enjoyable to deal with pain and sorrow, but it's necessary and it's important. So I encourage people to find whatever that outlet that you may be comfortable with. If you want to be in a room and just cry for hours by yourself, do that. If that's going to help you, do that. And make sure that people around you know to give you your space to do that.
Mm-hmm.
If it's, meeting with a therapist, do that. Do whatever you need to do. And I know it's hard because your emotions are, you may not even know what you need to do. Um, you know, people should be more supportive too, because sometimes people don't know, even though people around you don't really necessarily know how to be supportive either. They're like, hey, well, I pray for you if you need anything. I don't know what I need. I'm messed up. I don't know what I need.
Mm-hmm.
I need help figuring this all out. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, people also should learn how to be supportive for someone that loses a family member, because you may not relate. You may have both your parents, so you don't know what it's like losing a parent.
Right.
Um,
It's so
and that's
different.
okay. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. But you also may need to educate yourself on how to help that person grieve. Because if you're with a person that has just lost their parent, you can't relate to them. You may want to try, you may think you can, but you cannot. Until
Yep.
you unfortunately go through that, you will never know how that person is feeling. You could never relate to that because you have both your parents. Um, so, people, spouses and significant others, and, mothers, even, for children. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's just, it's something that is not, um, is not easy for anyone. But, you have to try to be supportive, because, there's a lot of people walking around with heavy hearts every day, and don't even realize it.
That's right.
Don't even realize it. So, it's important to educate yourself, and try to deal. It's like I said, it's not easy, because I went through. It took me a long time, and I don't want that for anybody. You know, so it's important to try to learn how to deal, as much as you may not want to, because let me tell you, it ain't easy dealing with certain demons. It's not easy. It's not easy, and I wouldn't call that a demon, but because death is something that we all have to deal with. But it's not easy opening that door to pain that you've hidden, that
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to open up. You don't want to deal with. You don't want to feel again. And that's why I say the longer you wait,
Right.
it's not going to go away.
Right.
It's just going to be, when it hits you, it's going to hit you like a ton of bricks,
So
because you
hard.
suppressed it for so long that you forgot what that pain was like.
Mm-hmm.
That was the whole point of suppressing it, so you don't have to think about it. But now, when you deal with it, it's going to hit you like a ton of bricks, and
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be so overwhelming for you. The longer you wait, the more overwhelming it is to overcome. And that's why I'm saying, please, if you need